On the 1st of October, 2022, police fired tear gas inside a football stadium full of fans in Malang, Indonesia. Not outside the stadium, not near the stadium, inside, into a crowd of 42,000 people. Then they locked the exits so nobody could get out. 135 people never made it home, and the chemical weapon they used had been banned by FIFA inside stadiums for years. This is how it happened. To understand how this was allowed to happen, you have to start with the match itself. And then you have to look at every single system that was supposed to prevent what came after, because not one of them worked. Arema FC against Persebaya Surabaya. These were not just rival clubs. They were the two biggest football teams. In East Java, a region where football is not a sport so much as an identity, Arema had not lost to Persebaya at home in 23 years. On October 1st, they lost 3-2. The stadium held an official capacity of 38,000. That night, approximately 42,000 tickets had been sold. When the final whistle blew, a section of Arema supporters moved onto the pitch. Not all of them, not most of them, but enough, around 3,000 people, according to later estimates, that the riot police deployed inside. The stadium made a decision. They fired tear gas. That decision is the center of everything that followed, because tear gas in an enclosed stadium is not a crowd control tool. It is a weapon that removes the most basic human ability to choose where to go. When tear gas hits, you cannot see. You cannot breathe. Your only instinct is to move away from the source, and to move fast. FIFA's own safety and security regulations had addressed this specific scenario directly. The regulations state that riot control gas and firearms are forbidden in stadiums. Not discouraged, not restricted, forbidden. The Indonesian police that night fired 45 canisters of tear gas into the stands, into a stadium with 42,000 people inside, into a stadium where the exits were already struggling to handle the crowd that was trying to leave. Here is where the architecture of Kanjuruhan Stadium became a second cause of death. The stadium had been built in 1994. It had 13 gates. On the night of October 1st, several of those gates were locked. Witnesses described what happened next with a consistency that investigators would later find impossible to dispute. People ran from the tear gas toward the exits. The exits were not open. The crowd compressed. And in that compression, in the space between a locked gate and 42,000 panicking people, men, women, and children were crushed and asphyxiated. One witness said he saw a woman holding a baby. The baby was suffocating. He took off his jacket, wrapped it around them both, and tried to pull them out. Then they got separated. He never found out what happened to them. Indonesia's Human Rights Commission, Komnas HAM, conducted an independent investigation. Their finding was direct. The excessive and indiscriminate use of tear gas by police was the primary cause of the deaths. Not the pitch invasion, not the fans. The tear gas, fired in violation of FIFA regulations, fired into a locked stadium, fired by officers who had been stationed inside specifically to maintain safety. The commission found 135 people dead, 583 injured. Most of the fatalities caused by asphyxiation. Second deadliest stadium disaster in the history of football. In the weeks after the collapse, 6 individuals were charged. 3 stadium officials for violating safety rules. 3 police officers for negligent use of tear gas. The trials moved through Indonesia's courts across 2023. And here is where the verdicts become the second story inside this one. The stadium officials received sentences ranging from 1 year to 1 year and 6 months. The police officers received sentences between 1 year and 6 months and 2 years and 6 months for 135 deaths. Human rights organizations described the sentences as grossly inadequate. Families of the victims used a different word. They called it impunity. But the detail that would define the legacy of Kanjuruhan was not the sentences. It was what happened 4 months later. In February 2023, at a different football stadium, in a different Indonesian city, riot police again fired tear gas at supporters. After 135 people had died, after the Human Rights Commission had published its findings, after the government had announced a series of reforms to football safety, they used tear gas again. One expert who had been tracking police conduct in Indonesia told a journalist at the time, and these were his exact words. This is tied to a bigger picture of police impunity. Kanjuruhan was not the first time, and the question now is, what else has to happen before anything actually changes? That question did not have a clean answer in 2023. It does not have one now. What the Kanjuruhan disaster revealed was not a single decision made by a single officer on a single night. It revealed a system in which a banned weapon was routinely available inside stadiums, in which exit gates at a 38,000 capacity venue could be locked during a match with no one responsible for checking them, in which a governing body had published explicit rules that the people enforcing the rules had never been required to follow, and in which 135 people could die inside a football stadium on a Saturday night in October. And the men responsible could be home by the following year. The last thing investigators confirmed was also the most simple. If the gates had been open, the deaths would almost certainly not have happened. Not most of them, not in the way they did. People can run from tear gas if they have somewhere to run. Gate 13, the exit where most of the victims died, is now a permanent memorial. Families still visit it. The football season continued.